The fluorescent lights of O'Hare's Terminal 3 were an oppressive, sterile buzz, even at 5 a.m. Officer Mark Caldwell, badge 944B, leaned against his podium, his coffee tasting like ash. He saw her approaching, a black woman, maybe 35, wearing sweats that looked slept in and hair pulled back in a way he found messy. He hated the 5 a.m. crowd. He picked up his document scanner. When she handed him her passport, he didn't even look at her face. He just looked for a reason. And then he found it. A slight, almost invisible fraying at the corner of the lamination. A smirk touched his lips. This was his checkpoint. He was the law, and she wasn't going anywhere. Chicago O'Hare International Airport, known by its designation ORD, is not a place of joy. It is a sprawling kingdom of concrete, glass, and pressurized impatience. At 4:45 a.m., it is a special kind of purgatory, a place where the anxieties of the day have not yet masked the exhaustion of the night. The air smells of industrial cleaner, burnt coffee from a distant Starbucks, and the faint, unsettling ozone of the security scanners. This was the world Dr. Alani Davis had immersed herself in for the past 6 months. To the untrained eye, she was Keisha Williams, a woman taking a much-needed vacation. Her disguise was meticulous in its ordinariness. She wore simple grey joggers, a faded Northwestern University sweatshirt, a detail chosen to blend in locally, and running shoes that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled into a functional, slightly messy puff. She carried a standard black roller bag and a crossbody purse. She wore no makeup. She looked tired, unremarkable, and slightly stressed, exactly like 90% of the passengers dragging themselves through the security line at checkpoint 7A. She was, in reality, a GS-15 senior investigator for the Federal Aviation Administration, temporarily assigned to a Department of Transportation Red Team. Her official title was National Compliance Auditor, but what she really did was hunt for the cracks in the system. She was a professional ghost, a secret shopper for national security. Her job was to fly commercial, blend in, and test the human element of aviation security. She tested for complacency, for procedural drift, and, most importantly, for bias. Bias was the vulnerability that technology couldn't fix. A scanner could find a weapon, but it couldn't see a racist assumption, and an assumption could be just as dangerous. She'd been in the queue for 38 minutes. It was the perfect test environment. The early shift was often staffed by the most fatigued or the most cynical. The line was long, populated by grumpy business travelers and confused families. Alani observed. She noted the way the TSO, Transportation Security Officer, at the initial check-in, barked at an elderly couple, snatching their IDs. She noted the inconsistency in laptop removal instructions. She saw one TSO wave through a white man in an expensive suit who had clearly forgotten to take his belt off, while the same TSO forced a young Hispanic man to remove his shoes, belt, and hoodie. Alani knew the checkpoint was operated not directly by the TSA, but by Global Secure Solutions, one of the private contractors utilized under the Screening Partnership Program, SPP. This added another layer of complexity. These officers weren't government employees, they were corporate hires, often paid less and trained faster. Her gaze settled on the TSO at the document verification podium she was being funneled toward. He was a white man in his late 40s, tall, with a military-style haircut that was sharp and severe. His uniform was pressed, but a small coffee stain marred his blue tie just below the knot. His name tag read, M. Caldwell. His badge number, 944B, was clearly visible. Officer Mark Caldwell was not a happy man. He'd spent 8 years in the Army as an MP, and he'd spent the last 12 years at this checkpoint. He saw his job as the last line of defense, But what he defended, in his mind, was not the nation, but his own small patch of authority against an endless tide of idiots. He hated the passengers. He hated their stupid questions, their oversized liquids, their entitled attitudes. He especially hated the ones who looked like they didn't belong in the priority lanes, but somehow ended up there. He looked up, his eyes scanning the next customer. He saw Keisha Williams. His lip curled just slightly. Another one, he thought, the internal monologue running hot. Sweatpants, probably flying on points someone else earned, going to block up the line asking how to use the scanner. Alani felt his eyes on her long before she reached the podium. It was a heavy, judgmental stare that she had felt her entire life. But now, it was a data point. Subject exhibits preemptive negative assessment based on visual profile she mentally dictated for the report she would write later. "Next," Caldwell barked, not looking up from his screen. Alani stepped forward, maintaining the slightly nervous demeanor of Keisha. "Good morning," she said, her voice polite. Caldwell grunted. "ID and boarding pass." Alani handed him her documents. The boarding pass was for Air France Flight 331, Chicago to Paris. The identification was a brand new, valid U.S. passport book. It was her personal passport, not her official government one, but it was perfectly legal, issued just 3 months prior. Caldwell took the documents. His thumb, rough and dry, brushed against her photo. He looked at the picture, a standard, neutral expression, and then up at her. His eyes raked over her, from her hair to her shoes. "Keisha Williams," he said, drawing the name out, making it sound foreign and suspicious. "Yes," Alani replied. He looked back at the passport. "Going to Paris?" It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Yes, for a vacation," Alani said, keeping her tone light. Caldwell's fingers tightened on the blue booklet. He held it up to the UV light, his movements unnecessarily rough. "Vacation. Must be nice." Alani didn't respond. She just waited. This was the critical phase, the interview. It wasn't just about matching a face to a photo. It was about the officer making a gut judgment. And Officer Caldwell's gut was rotten. He swiped the passport. The machine beeped, valid. The screen in front of him flashed green, showing her face, her flight information, and the all clear. But Caldwell didn't hand it back. He turned the passport over in his hands. He bent the cover back, running his thumb hard along the spine, testing the binding. He scraped his fingernail against the corner of the laminated data page. "Officer, is there a problem?" Alani asked, infusing her voice with the exact amount of nervous tremor a regular passenger would have. "I'll ask the questions," Caldwell snapped, his voice rising just enough to turn the heads of the people behind her. "This lamination, it's peeling." Alani knew it wasn't. That passport was pristine. It had been inspected by her own department's quality control before she'd even packed. "I don't think so," she said. "It's brand new." "Are you calling me a liar?" Caldwell leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low growl. He was enjoying this. He was exerting control. "I see this all the time. People buy these fakes, peel the lamination, stick a new picture in. You think we're stupid?" The people in line behind her began to shift. A man in a business suit huffed. "Come on, man, just scan it and let's go." Caldwell shot him a look. "You want to fly today, sir? Or do you want to be detained for interfering with a federal screening process? Back up." The man shut up. Caldwell turned his full, undivided, toxic attention back to Alani. "Where did you get this?" "It was issued by the U.S. State Department," Alani said, her voice firm, the Keisha persona cracking slightly to be replaced by a woman who was getting annoyed. This shift enraged Caldwell. He saw it as defiance. He saw a type of person who always had an attitude, who always thought the rules didn't apply to them. "This document looks tampered with," he declared, his voice now loud enough for the whole checkpoint to hear. "The data page is compromised." "Officer, I can assure you it is not," Alani said, her own training kicking in. "De-escalate. Observe. Report. If you need to verify it, please call a supervisor. But that is a valid, federally issued document." Caldwell heard supervisor as a threat. He saw her composure as arrogance. He looked at her, at the simple sweats and the tired face, and then at the passport photo of a professional woman. And then he looked at the destination, Paris. He made a decision. It was a decision born of 1,000 tiny frustrations, a deep-seated bitterness, and a profound, unchecked bias. He held the passport in one hand. "This," he said, "is not valid." And with his other hand, he grabbed the data page. The air at checkpoint 7A became thick and static. The ambient noise of wheeled luggage and hushed conversations seemed to fall away, creating a vacuum around the podium. Alani Davis watched Officer Caldwell's face. She saw the flash of irrational anger in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. She recognized this look. It was the precursor to an abuse of power. Her mind was now split. One half, Keisha, was terrified, about to miss her flight, about to be stranded. The other half, Dr. Davis, was a cold, analytical engine. Subject is hostile. Subject is ignoring positive validation from the scanning system. Subject is creating a pretext for escalation. This is a classic Category 4 bias incident. "Officer Caldwell," Alani said, her voice dropping, losing all pretense of the nervous passenger. It was flat, clear, and professional. "You have scanned the document. It has cleared. Please return my property." The change in her tone was not lost on Caldwell. He interpreted it as a challenge. He saw her composure not as professionalism, but as the supreme arrogance of someone who thought they were above him. He, Mark Caldwell, was the guardian of this gate, and this woman in her cheap sweatshirt was not going to tell him what to do. "Your property?" he scoffed. "This document," he tapped the passport, "is the property of the United States government, and I am a representative of that government, and I am telling you, it's compromised." He was holding the passport open to the data page, his left thumb on her photo, his right thumb on the adjacent visa page. "If you believe the document is compromised," Alani stated, her eyes locked on his, "your protocol is to alert a supervisor and escort me to a secondary screening room for document verification by CBP. Your protocol is not to adjudicate its validity yourself." She had just quoted, almost verbatim, Section 4.1b of the Global Secure Operations Manual, a manual she had helped review 2 years prior. Caldwell's face went from pale to a dull, mottled red. She had cornered him. She had called him out on procedure. He was suddenly aware of the line of people watching, of his fellow TSOs glancing over. He was being embarrassed. And by her. "You want to tell me my job?" he whispered, leaning so far over the podium that Alani could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You think you're smart?" He looked down at the passport, this little blue book that gave her the right to go to Paris, the right to challenge him. He saw it as the source of her arrogance, and he decided, in that moment, to destroy it. "This lamination," he said again, his voice a low growl. "It's peeling right here." He dug his right fingernail under the edge of the laminate on the data page. It was a brand new passport. There was no purchase. He had to dig hard, scratching the surface, creating the very damage he was claiming to have found. Alani's heart, despite her training, began to hammer against her ribs. This was no longer an audit. This was a crime. "Stop," Alani said. The word was not a plea, it was a command. "Do not damage that document." "Damage it?" Caldwell laughed, a short, barking sound. "It's already damaged. It's fake." And then he did it. He didn't just bend it. He didn't just crease it. He braced the passport with his left hand, and with his right, he tore it. He ripped the data page, the polycarbonate page with her photograph, her identity, and the chip, straight down the middle. The sound was not loud. It was a sickening, fibrous scrunch, a sound of finality, a sound that cut through the low hum of the terminal. It was a complete, willful, and irreversible act of destruction. For a single, crystalline second, nobody moved. The woman behind Alani gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The businessman who had complained earlier just stared, his eyes wide. Even the other TSOs froze, their hands hovering over belts and bins. Alani looked from the mutilated passport, which Caldwell still held, to his face. Caldwell's expression was one of pure, triumphant malice. He had won. He had put her back in her place. He tossed the two separated halves of the data page, along with the passport booklet, onto the podium. The two pieces skittered on the stainless steel and came to rest near her boarding pass. "Looks like your vacation is cancelled," Officer Caldwell sneered. "This document is invalid. Step out of the line. You're not flying today." He motioned to the side, to the grey, carpeted area reserved for problem passengers. He crossed his arms, the very picture of authority, waiting for the tears, the yelling, the meltdown. He was waiting for her to prove his assumptions right. He got none of it. Alani Davis stood perfectly still. The Keisha persona evaporated like mist in a desert. The woman who remained was not a tourist. She was not a victim. She was a federal investigator at a crime scene. Her breathing was calm. Her adrenaline spike had been channeled, not into fear, but into a glacial, terrifying focus. She did not look at the other passengers. She did not look at her ruined passport. She looked directly into Officer Mark Caldwell's eyes. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet. It was not a yell. It was the quietest, sharpest sound in the entire terminal, and it sliced through his triumph like a scalpel. "Officer Mark Caldwell," she said, her cadence precise. "Badge 944B, note the time, 5:04 a.m. You have just, willfully and with malice, destroyed United States government property in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1543. Caldwell's smirk wavered. It was confusion, not fear. "What did you say? You threatening me? Get out of the line before I call the police." "I am not threatening you, officer," Alani continued, her voice remaining perfectly level. "I am making a statement of fact. You have also, in your capacity as a screening agent, interfered with the duties of a federal officer. That is Title 18, Section 111. Caldwell's bravado began to crack, the red in his face draining away, leaving a pasty, unwell pallor. "What? What are you talking about? Federal officer? You?" He laughed, but the sound was brittle. "You're a federal officer?" "Sure, lady, and I'm the president. Now move." Alani did not move. "Call your supervisor," she said. "Call him right now. Call Supervisor Henderson, and then call the Chicago Police Airport Operations. Tell them you have a Code 3 situation at Checkpoint 7A. "I'm not calling anyone," Caldwell blustered, trying to regain his footing. "I'm calling for an officer to remove you." He reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Do it," Alani said. "Because the moment you do, you will be initiating an arrest. Your own." She slowly, deliberately, reached not for her purse, but for the small, zipped pocket on the inside of her faded sweatshirt, a pocket that had been specially sewn in. Caldwell paused, his hand on his radio. The entire line was staring. The checkpoint had ground to a halt. You have, Alani said, her hand still inside the pocket, just committed a felony, and you have done it while being observed as part of a federally mandated compliance audit. She pulled her hand from the pocket. In it was not a wallet, but a black leather credential case. She flipped it open. There was no Keisha Williams. There was a gold-embossed badge of the Federal Aviation Administration, and below it, a high-security photo ID card. Dr. Alani Davis, she announced, her voice resonating with an authority that shook him to his core. Department of Transportation, and Officer Caldwell, you just failed your audit. The reveal of the badge was like a detonator. The air, which had been static, now shattered. Officer Mark Caldwell stared at the gold emblem and the stern, official photograph of Dr. Alani Davis. It was the same woman, but the ID photo had her in a severe black blazer, her hair tied back. The hologram of the DOT seal shimmered under the fluorescent lights. The words, Federal Aviation Administration and Senior Investigator, were stark and undeniable. Caldwell's mind simply refused to process it. This was a trick. It had to be. This woman in the sweatshirt could not be this. That's fake, he stammered, the first words that came to his mouth. It was a pathetic defense, and he knew it as soon as he said it. The credential case was high-grade leather. The badge was heavy, not a tin replica. Alani didn't even blink. Call your supervisor, officer. Now. Across the checkpoint, a TSO named Maria, who had been managing the X-ray belt, saw the confrontation had stalled the entire line. She keyed her own radio. Supervisor Henderson, we have a hard stop at Podium 7. Possible non-compliant passenger. It's not a non-compliant passenger, Alani called out, her voice loud enough for Maria to hear. It's a TSO destroying federal property. Get Henderson here immediately, and tell him to bring the ranking Global Secure Terminal manager. Maria's eyes went wide. She fumbled the radio. Supervisor, you need to get to 7. Now, it's an official. The word official was like a cattle prod. Within 90 seconds, a short, overweight man in a slightly better-fitting blue shirt came bustling through the employees-only gate. This was Supervisor Henderson. He was a lifer at Global Secure, a man whose entire career was built on keeping the lines moving and the complaints minimal. An incident meant paperwork. What's going on here, Caldwell? Henderson puffed, arriving at the podium. Why is this line stopped? Ma'am, you need to... He stopped short. He saw the ruined passport on the podium. He saw Caldwell, who looked like he'd seen a ghost. And he saw the open credentials in Dr. Alani Davis's hand. Henderson's blood ran cold. He had seen contractor credentials. He had seen airline credentials. He had even seen FBI credentials once. But FAA ... Here, at his checkpoint, that meant one thing, an audit. A red team audit. The kind they only heard rumors about. The kind that got terminals shut down. Oh God, Henderson whispered. He turned to Alani, his entire demeanor shifting from annoyed manager to groveling subordinate. Ma'am, investigator, I'm Supervisor Henderson. What seems to be the problem here? The problem, Supervisor, Alani said, finally snapping her credential case shut and pointing a single steady finger at Caldwell, is your officer. She then laid it out, her voice devoid of emotion, each word a hammer blow of fact. At 04:58, I presented a valid U.S. passport and boarding pass. At 04:59, Officer Caldwell scanned the passport. The document cleared. Your system validated it. Instead of returning it, Officer Caldwell accused me of carrying a fraudulent document. He alleged the lamination was peeling. It was not. When I informed him of the proper protocol to request a supervisor for secondary verification, he became hostile. He then, at 05:04, deliberately and maliciously dug his fingernail into the data page and tore it in half. Henderson looked at the 2 pieces of the passport on the steel counter. He looked at Caldwell. "Mark." Henderson's voice was a desperate squeak. Caldwell was trapped. His universe was collapsing. She had an attitude. The passport looked fake. It was peeling, I swear. She was giving me attitude, boss, telling me how to do my job. "So you destroyed it?" Alani asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Mark, you tore it?" Henderson was trembling. He knew what this meant. This wasn't just a complaint. This was career ending. This was contract ending. Global Secure could lose ORD over this. Caldwell's bravado was gone, replaced by a panicked, pleading look. "It was an accident. I was testing the lamination and it just tore. It was weak. It was fake." "It was not an accident," Alani said flatly. "I observed your hand. I observed your intent. You tore it with deliberate force, and you did it after I identified myself, by function, if not by name, as being aware of your protocol. You did it to put me in my place." She turned her gaze to Henderson. "Supervisor, your officer is now lying to you, which, I might add, will be noted in my report. Now, I need 2 things. First, you will relieve Officer Caldwell of his duties, immediately. He is not to interact with another passenger. He is to be detained in your office until CPD arrives. He is now the subject of a federal investigation." "Detained?" Caldwell yelped. "You can't arrest me." "I'm not," Alani said. "I am, however, ordering you to be held pending an investigation into the destruction of federal property. But if you attempt to leave, you will be adding resisting a federal officer to the list. Your choice." "Mark," Henderson hissed, grabbing Caldwell's arm. "Shut your mouth. Shut it now. Go to the break room. Do not talk to anyone. Just go." Caldwell, finally realizing the depth of the chasm he had fallen into, gave Alani one last look. It was a mixture of pure hatred and primal fear. He turned, unclipped his radio, and walked like a zombie through the employee gate. "Second," Alani continued, turning back to Henderson as if Caldwell had never existed. "You are to retrieve every second of video surveillance from this checkpoint. I want the overhead camera, the camera at your podium, and Officer Caldwell's body camera footage, if he was wearing one." He wasn't," Henderson stammered. "Global Secure hasn't implemented them at ORD yet. Too expensive." "How convenient," Alani said, a flicker of ice in her tone. "Then the overheads will have to suffice. I want them pulled now. I want a copy delivered to me in your office. I also want your terminal manager, Mr. Shaw, paged and brought to that office in the next 10 minutes. Am I clear?" "Yes, investigator. Yes, ma'am." "Crystal clear." Henderson was already on his radio, his voice shaking, calling for another TSO to cover the podium, and for his manager, Silas Shaw, to meet him in the operations office code red. Alani finally bent down. She carefully picked up the 2 halves of her ruined passport data page and the blue booklet. She held them in her hand. This was the evidence. The passengers in line were staring, whispering. They had just witnessed a complete realignment of the universe. The powerless had become the powerful. Alani looked at the line, then at Henderson. "Get another officer on this podium, Supervisor. You've held up these people long enough." She then looked at the businessman who had told Caldwell to hurry up. He looked at her with newfound respect, almost awe. Alani just nodded, then turned. "Supervisor, your office. Lead the way." As she walked through the employees-only door, leaving the checkpoint and the staring passengers behind, she pulled out her official, encrypted, DOT-issued phone. She dialed a single number. A man's voice answered on the first ring. "Davis. Status." "Martin," she said, "I'm off the plane. The test is concluded at ORD, checkpoint 7A. What's the finding? Martin asked, his voice all business. Alani paused as Henderson frantically punched a code into a keypad. We have a critical failure, Martin. A catastrophic, deliberate breach. Get me a secure line to Director Vance at DHS and find me the head of OIG for this district. We're going nuclear on this one. The Global Secure Solutions Operations Office at O'Hare was a small, windowless room that smelled of stale air and microwave popcorn. It was a sharp contrast to the soaring architecture of the terminal. This was the terminal's gritty underside, a world of beige filing cabinets, flickering monitors showing security feeds, and laminated procedure charts taped to the walls. Alani sat at a cheap laminate table, the 2 pieces of her passport placed in front of her, like evidence at a trial. Supervisor Henderson was pacing, sweating profusely, and speaking in low, frantic tones on his desk phone. Yes, Mr. Shaw, I understand. No, I don't know why she was red-teaming us. Yes, tore it, as in half. Mark Caldwell. Yes, sir. He's in break room B. No, I haven't told him anything else. Yes, sir. He hung up and looked at Alani. Mr. Shaw, our terminal director, is on his way. He's coming from the international terminal. And our corporate legal counsel is on a conference call. They want to know what you want. Alani looked up from her phone. What I want, Mr. Henderson, is irrelevant. What is happening is that I am filing an incident report with the Department of Transportation and the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Inspector General. What is happening is that your company, Global Secure, has just had one of its agents commit a felony against a federal officer during a compliance audit. The want part of this equation is long gone. Henderson looked like he was going to be sick. He was a manager. He dealt with complaints, with sick days, with broken scanners. He did not deal with federal investigations. He said it was an accident, Henderson offered weakly. And I will state for the record he is lying, Alani countered. The video will confirm it. Where is the video? It's pulling. Our retention system is slow. It takes time to buffer and download. Get it, Alani said, or my report will reflect that Global Secure was non-compliant in providing evidence. Henderson flinched and lunged for the phone again, dialing his IT support. Just then, the door burst open. A tall man in an expensive, sharply tailored suit strode in. He was in his 50s, with silvering hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. This was Silas Shaw, the terminal director for Global Secure, the man responsible for the entire ORD operation. He was followed by 2 Chicago police officers, their faces grim. Dr. Davis? Shaw asked, his voice a commanding baritone. He was not panicked. He was in containment mode. I am Silas Shaw. I have been appraised of the allegation. I cannot express my shock. First, let me offer the sincerest apologies of Global Secure Solutions. Officer Caldwell's alleged actions are heinous, unacceptable, and in no way reflect our company's values or training. Alani met his gaze. He was smooth. Mr. Shaw, thank you for coming. These officers, are they for me or for your employee? They are here to assist your investigation in any way you require, Dr. Davis, Shaw said. He gestured to the 2 CPD officers. Officer, please wait outside. We will call you if you are needed. The police, looking slightly confused but understanding the hierarchy, nodded and stepped back into the hallway. Shaw turned back to Alani. Now, this is a terrible, terrible incident. We have already begun the process of terminating Officer Caldwell, effective immediately. We will, of course, cover the full cost of replacing your document and any and all expenses related to your missed flight. Alani held up a hand. The gesture was small, but it silenced the high-powered executive instantly. Mr. Shaw, stop." She let the silence hang in the room. Henderson had frozen, phone in hand. "You seem to be under the impression," Alani said, her voice cold, "that I am a customer, that I am a passenger whose vacation has been ruined. You seem to believe this is a customer service issue that can be solved with an apology and a reimbursement." She leaned forward. "I am not here as a customer. I am not here on vacation. I was here on an official, covert audit to test your checkpoint's vulnerability to bias-based procedural failures. And your employee, Officer Caldwell, just gave me a final report that is going to rock your entire company. He didn't just fail. He provided a textbook example of a catastrophic failure. He profiled me. He escalated based on that profile. He ignored procedure, and then he willfully destroyed a federal document as an act of petty tyranny." Shaw's corporate smile vanished. This was worse than he thought. "You don't think I'm here about a passport, do you?" Alani continued. "I have a diplomatic passport in my bag that would have gotten me on that flight. This isn't about my travel. This is about your contract. This is about a man with a badge, employed by your company, operating with malice on a federal security line. Now," she said, shifting gears, "here is what happens next. Your internal termination of Officer Caldwell is your business. My business is the criminal complaint. I am filing charges against him personally for violating Title 18, Section 1543. That carries a sentence of up to 10 years in prison. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be in touch with him." Shaw was pale. "Dr. Davis, surely. It was a lapse in judgment. The man has worked here for 12 years. A fine, a termination, yes. But prison." "He tore a federal passport in half," Alani stated, as if explaining to a child. "He didn't spill coffee on it. He didn't accidentally bend it. He tore it, in front of 20 witnesses, after being warned. The lapse in judgment was a felony. His 12-year employment record is not a defense. It's an aggravating factor. It means he's had 12 years to learn the protocol, and he chose to ignore it." Before Shaw could respond, Alani's encrypted phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. "Excuse me," she answered. "Director Vance." She listened for a moment. "Yes, sir. Yes, that's correct. ORD. Checkpoint 7A. An SPP contractor, Global Secure. Yes, sir. I have the pieces. I'm with their terminal director now. Yes, sir. I will. Thank you." She hung up. She looked at Shaw, her expression unreadable. That was the director of DHS Security Operations. He is displeased. He is grounding all Global Secure operations at O'Hare, pending an immediate, full-scale audit of your training, hiring, and performance records. Effective in 1 hour, TSA federal officers will be flown in from Midway to take over every checkpoint you manage in this airport. Henderson made a small gagging sound and sat down heavily. Shaw stumbled back, physically reeling as if he'd been struck. "What? You can't... We have 800 employees here. You can't shut us down in an hour. The terminal will descend into chaos." "Then you should have trained your people not to commit felonies," Alani said. "That, however, is not my problem. My problem is securing this facility. And as of this moment, my audit has concluded that Global Secure's management of this checkpoint is a threat to security, not a protector of it. Your team is being relieved." This is a billion-dollar contract," Shaw was yelling now, his corporate mask gone, revealing the desperate man beneath. "And you trusted it to Officer Caldwell," Alani replied. "Now, Supervisor Henderson, where is my video?" The door opened again. This time it was a nervous-looking IT technician holding a small black hard drive. "The footage, Mr. Henderson, from 04:45 to 05:15. Camera 12. "Give it to me," Alani said, holding out her hand. The technician, ignoring his bosses, walked over and handed the drive directly to her. Alani stood up, tucking the drive into her pocket. She picked up the pieces of her passport. Mr. Shaw, Mr. Henderson, an investigator from the DOT Office of the Inspector General will be here within the hour. Her name is Julia Romano. You are to give her everything she asks for. Officer Caldwell's entire file, all complaints against him, sealed or otherwise. Your training manuals. Everything. If you are not fully cooperative, I will personally recommend to Director Vance that he begin proceedings to have the Global Secure SPP contract cancelled nationwide. She walked to the door, passing the shell-shocked Shaw. Dr. Davis, Shaw said, his voice a hoarse whisper. This is disproportionate. It's one bad employee. You're ruining hundreds of lives over a passport. Alani stopped at the door, her back to him. You're wrong, Mr. Shaw. You still don't get it. She turned, her eyes burning with a cold fire that had been absent until now. He didn't do this because he's a bad employee. He did this because he is a racist. He did this because he saw a black woman in sweats, and he decided she had no power. He decided she was beneath him. He didn't do this to a white man in a suit. He didn't do it to the elderly couple in front of me. He did it to me. This isn't about a passport, she finished. It's about the fact that your company, your training, and your supervision allowed a man like that to hold a position of power, and he used that power to assault a citizen based on her race. The fact that the citizen he chose was a federal officer on an audit, that's not his tragedy, Mr. Shaw. That's karma. She opened the door and walked out, leaving the ruins of their careers behind her. Mark Caldwell sat in the grey, windowless break room, the silence buzzing in his ears. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and old socks. For the first hour, he was just angry. He paced, muttering to himself. That bitch. That trick. Setting me up. Lying about who she was. How was I supposed to know? She came in dressed like trash. It was peeling. It was? He was a man who had built his life on a fragile foundation of authority. His army career had topped out at specialist. His marriage had failed. His kids didn't talk to him. This job, this uniform, this podium, this was all he had. It was the only place in the world where people had to respect him. When Dr. Alani Davis, in her Keisha disguise, had challenged him with her calm, procedural language, she had threatened the very core of his identity. Ripping the passport had been a desperate, reflexive reassertion of his dominance. It had felt good. It did not feel good now. He kept waiting for Henderson to come in and tell him it was all sorted out. Maybe he'd be suspended for a week, with pay. He'd have to take some stupid sensitivity training webinar, but they'd protect him. Global Secure always protected its own, especially against problem passengers. But Henderson didn't come. At 06:30, the door opened. It wasn't Henderson. It was Silas Shaw, the terminal director, a man Caldwell had only ever seen from a distance, and behind him were the two CPD officers. Mark Caldwell? Shaw asked, his voice dead. Yeah, Mr. Shaw, boss. Listen, this is all a misunderstanding. That woman, she, Mr. Caldwell. Shaw cut him off. You are terminated from Global Secure Solutions, effective immediately. Your credentials are to be surrendered. The Chicago Police Department officers are here to escort you from the premises. The blood drained from Caldwell's face. Terminated? What? You can't. I've been here 12 years. You can't just fire me over one complaint. It is not a complaint, Mark, Shaw said, his eyes filled with contempt. It is a felony investigation. You are a liability I can no longer afford. Give me your badge and your airport ID. One of the CPD officers stepped forward. Sir, we're not arresting you at this time, but we are trespassing you from the airport. You will be escorted to your vehicle, and you are not to return to O'Hare property. Do you understand? Trespassing? Caldwell's voice was a high-pitched whine. This is my job. You're siding with her? Shaw just held out his hand. Defeated, his entire body slumping, Caldwell unclipped his badge from his belt and pulled the lanyard with his ID over his head. He handed them to Shaw. The metal was still warm. Now, Shaw said, pocketing them. Get your personal items from your locker. The officers will wait for you. Do not cause a scene. Caldwell was marched through the back hallways, the sterile corridor, past the other TSOs, who were now being briefed by frantic-looking supervisors. They saw him being escorted by police, and the message was clear. The king of Checkpoint 7A was being dethroned. He was deposited in the employee parking garage, a cold, dark, concrete expanse. The CPD officers watched him get into his 10-year-old Ford Focus, its fender dented. He sat there for a long time, the engine off, as the sun began to rise, painting the polluted Chicago sky a sick, pale orange. He was 51 years old. He had just been fired, trespassed from his own job, and his last paycheck would be docked. But his day was only beginning. He drove home to his small, rented condo in Des Plaines. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a deep, terrifying dread. He tried to call Henderson, but the call went straight to voicemail. He tried to call his union rep, but the rep's line was busy. He turned on the TV, hoping for a distraction, but he couldn't focus. He kept seeing her face. Not the Keisha face, but the Dr. Davis face. The cold, assessing eyes. Title 18, Section 1543. He Googled it. Whoever falsely makes, forges, counterfeits, mutilates, or alters any passport, or willfully and knowingly uses any such false, forged, counterfeited, mutilated, or altered passport, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years. 10 years. He threw up in his kitchen sink. At 3:00 p.m., his doorbell rang. He thought, with a surge of hope, that it might be Henderson, maybe with a lawyer, maybe with a plan. He opened the door. 2 people stood there, a man and a woman, both in dark, conservative business suits that screamed federal. Mr. Mark Caldwell, the woman asked. She was sharp, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun. Who are you? She flipped open a credential case. Julia Romano, Special Agent, Department of Transportation, Office of the Inspector General. This is Special Agent Price. May we come in? We have some questions about the incident at O'Hare this morning. Caldwell's legs gave out. He had to brace himself against the doorframe. I think I need a lawyer, he stammered. That is your right, sir, Agent Romano said, her voice pleasant, which was somehow more terrifying than if she had yelled. In fact, we'd recommend it. But we're here to interview you as part of our investigation. You can speak to us now, or you can refuse. However, we are also serving you with this. She handed him a folded document. It was a federal subpoena to appear before a grand jury. And, she added, we are also serving this. She handed him a second document. This is an arrest warrant, signed by Magistrate Judge Henderson this afternoon. Mark Caldwell, you are under arrest for the willful destruction of government property. Caldwell just stared. But, it was, sir. Agent Price, the bigger of the two, said, his voice gentle. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. The shame was overwhelming. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound he had ever heard. His neighbors, Mrs. Petroff and her little dog, were watching from their doorway as he was led out of his own home by federal agents. He wasn't just fired. He wasn't just suspended. He was a criminal. He had spent his entire life seeing the world in black and white, us versus them, the rule followers and the rule breakers. He had always been the one who enforced the rules. Now, in the back of an unmarked black sedan, he was just another perp, another piece of trash being processed by the system. He had built his tiny kingdom on a foundation of malice, and in one 5-second act of tearing paper, he had brought it all crashing down on his own head. The fallout from Incident OR 255A, as it was now coded, was not confined to Mark Caldwell. It was a bomb that detonated in the corporate headquarters of Global Secure Solutions in Reston, Virginia, and its shockwaves were felt all the way to Washington, D.C. When Dr. Alani Davis's initial report hit the desk of the DHS director, it was flagged with the highest possible urgency. It wasn't just a personnel complaint. It was a systemic security failure. An auditor, operating covertly, had been racially profiled and then assaulted by a screening agent who had destroyed a federal document. The agent's actions proved, in the starkest possible terms, that the SPP, Screening Partnership Program, at O'Hare was compromised. The immediate takeover by federal TSA officers was, as Silas Shaw had feared, chaotic. Flights were delayed for hours. The lines snaked back to the ticketing counters. It made the local news. But the message from DHS was unwavering. Security will not be compromised. Meanwhile, Inspector Julia Romano, the OIG agent, descended on the Global Secure offices at O'Hare like a force of nature. She was not Alani Davis. Alani was a field auditor, a tester. Romano was an investigator, a forensic accountant of human failure. She requisitioned everything. First, she got Caldwell's file. It was a revelation. In his 12 years, Mark Caldwell had amassed 18 passenger complaints. 9 of them were for rude and aggressive behavior. Crucially, 7 of those 9 had been filed by women of color. Romano sat in the office that had been Silas Shaw's. He was now indefinitely suspended, pending the corporate investigation, and read through them. Passenger alleges TSO Caldwell called her stupid for not removing her laptop. Action taken. Verbal warning. Passenger alleges TSO Caldwell threw her driver's license back at her. Action taken. None. Insufficient evidence. Passenger, a black woman, alleges TSO Caldwell detained her for 20 minutes to verify her passport, causing her to miss her flight while waving through white passengers. Action taken. Investigated by Supervisor Henderson. Finding. TSO Caldwell was following procedure. Romano's eyes narrowed. She cross-referenced that last complaint. The supervisor who had cleared Caldwell was, of course, Henderson. "Get me Henderson's file," she ordered her assistant. Henderson's file showed a man who was exemplary at managing budgets and shift schedules, but who consistently cleared complaints against his senior staff. He hadn't disciplined Caldwell in over 5 years. He hadn't enforced retraining. He had, in effect, enabled Caldwell's behavior. By dismissing the valid complaints from minority travelers, he had reinforced Caldwell's belief that he was untouchable. He had created the monster that Alani Davis had encountered. The video footage from camera 12 was the nail in the coffin. Romano watched it in a dark room, with Alani and 2 lawyers from the U.S. Attorney's Office. The angle was high, but the intent was clear. It wasn't grainy. You could see Caldwell's hand. You could see him scan the passport. You could see the green valid light flash on his screen. And then you could see him talk. You could see Alani's calm response. You could see him lean in, his body language aggressive. And then you could see the rip. It was not a tear. It was a pull. It was a deliberate, 2-handed gesture of destruction. There was no accident. He had not been testing the lamination. He had executed the document. "My God," one of the lawyers whispered. "He did it right on camera." "He felt empowered to," Alani said, her voice matter of fact. He believed he was immune. He believed I was no one. His supervisor had taught him he was right to believe that. The consequences were swift and brutal. Supervisor Henderson, fired by Global Secure within 24 hours. He was not charged criminally, but the OIG report cited him for gross negligence in supervision and a pattern of discriminatory complaint dismissal, effectively ending his career in aviation security. He would be lucky to get a job managing a fast food restaurant. Silas Shaw, the terminal director, was permanently removed from his post. The investigation found that the corporate culture at ORD prioritized line speed over security and civility, and he was held ultimately responsible. Global Secure Solutions, the hard karma hit them at a corporate level. The OIG audit, sparked by Alani's report, found that ORD was not an isolated incident. They found similar patterns of complaint suppression at 2 other airports they managed. DHS put their entire multi-billion-dollar SPP contract under review. They were fined $1.2 million for the ORD incident and failure to maintain training standards. They lost the O'Hare contract permanently. The stock price of their parent company dropped 8% in a single day. Dr. Alani Davis, her report became legendary. It was used as a case study at the TSA Academy and the FAA's own training facilities. It was titled The Caldwell Breach: Bias as a Catastrophic Security Threat. She was promoted, given a commendation by the Secretary of Transportation, and put in charge of a new, expanded Red Team task force to audit SPP contractors nationwide. The system had been shocked. A deep, festering wound of bias and complacency had been lanced, all because one man thought he could bully one woman. But the final act of karma was reserved for Mark Caldwell himself. Mark Caldwell spent 48 hours in jail before his ex-wife posted his $10,000 bond. His court-appointed defender was blunt. "You have no case." The video was irrefutable. The victim was a senior federal investigator, and the prosecutor was offering a plea that included jail time. At his sentencing hearing, Caldwell, shaking, offered a weak apology for his bad day. The AUSA demanded prison, calling Caldwell's actions a malicious, bias-driven abuse of power. Dr. Alani Davis watched silently from the front row. Judge Vance delivered the final reckoning. She called his actions a profound moment of karma. She spared him prison, but delivered a life sentence of another kind. 5 years of federal probation, 2,000 hours of community service, a $10,000 fine, and a permanent, lifetime ban from all federal and contractor employment. The hard karma was not a jail cell, but a new reality. The felony conviction and employment ban left him untouchable. Mark Caldwell, the man who once held power over travelers, was now invisible, working as a minimum-wage prep cook. Alani Davis simply left the courtroom. Justice served. She had another checkpoint to audit. This wasn't just a story about a bad day at the airport. It was a mirror held up to the tiny thrones of power we give to people every day, and the poison that seeps in when bias goes unchecked. Officer Caldwell believed his uniform made him a king, but he forgot that the woman in front of him was an inspector of kingdoms. He thought he was tearing up her vacation, but he was tearing up his entire life. The system, for once, worked. The audit was a success, the failure was contained, and the consequences were absolute. Hard karma isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet click of a federal agent's handcuffs and the silent, final signature on a termination letter. Thank you for listening to this story. If you were on the edge of your seat, imagine how Dr. Davis felt. If you believe that power must come with accountability, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more true life stories where karma isn't just a concept, It's a consequence.